This is On the Market, a Bigger Pockets podcast presented by Fundrise. Hey everyone, welcome to On the Market. I'm your host, Dave Meyer, joined today by the full panel. We have Kathy Fettke, James Daynard, Henry Washington, and Jamil Damji joining us. And all four of you just got back from what looked like a very fun party that I'm very sad to miss to celebrate Jamil. Jamil, congratulations. Can you tell everyone what you were celebrating?
Absolutely. Thank you for the shout out. We had the premiere of season 2 of Triple Digit Flip, and my brothers and sisters were all in attendance. Other than you, Dave, we missed you, but we had you there in spirit. It was a phenomenal premiere, super fun show, and the network executives came out. We had the Outlaws from Tupac and the Outlaws perform. It's like a childhood heroes of mine, and just got to live up a night that I'll never forget. It was super fun.
That's awesome, man. Well, congratulations. It's a great show, and you definitely deserve to celebrate all of your success there.
Thank you, bro.
Henry, what was the most compromising thing you saw or learned about Jamil during the party?
Great question.
Well, what's funny is when I showed up, he made me sign an NDA, so I can't really disclose what I did or didn't see. So all I can say is that it was a night definitely to remember. And in all seriousness, what I love about hanging out with Jamil is that his warm, inviting, and comforting nature is reflected in everybody that's around him. And so we're in a room full of hundreds of people, and everybody is just having a good time, sharing information with each other, loving on each other. And to be able to create a community like that is not only a testament to his success, but a testament to him as a person. So I thank you for letting me be there.
Thank you, man.
Wow. Awesome.
Oh.
Kathy, why? Do you have something mean to say?
I was going to say, no, I agree so much. Jamil and Pace are changing so many lives that the room was just full of hope and happiness and optimism of people who are learning how to invest and how to change their lives and their future that way. And there was just so much love in the room. And I got to see Jamil do some attempts at breakdancing, maybe.
You mean breaknecking?
Breaknecking.
There was a really cool full circle moment for me. I had posted a video about it, I think yesterday, but a guy came up to me who recognized me and said that he saw one of my videos about a challenge I was having a long time ago. And when I just started investing, and me talking about that challenging experience changed his life, his perspective. And he knew at that point he was going to be successful. And so he then ended up connecting with Pace's group. And while his mom was battling stage 4 cancer, he was able to go from where he was to make $90,000 in a year. And it was just cool to know that something that I said sparked this guy to get started. He then works with Pace. I didn't know Pace at the time. He probably started to connect with me. And then now we're all in the same room together at the same time, seeing his success. And so that's the impact that sharing this information about real estate can have on people. And the world is smaller than we think it is.
Man,
that's awesome. Wow. That's super cool. And congrats on the community that you've created there, Jamil.
Thank you, man. It's been a phenomenal experience, and it's just getting started. I see this as our life pursuit, and I'm excited to do this until they tell me to stop.
Amen.
I hope you do. The parties are fun.
James is like, yeah, community, whatever. I don't know. Let's have more parties.
I mean, James had one of the best outfits on ever. It was we did a 90s hip hop theme because it was so good.
I will say the community is awesome. I lost my credit card in the bathroom somehow, and someone had tracked me down somehow and handed me the card. I literally had just canceled it. He's like, James. He's like, I got your credit card. And I was like, oh, wow. It was.
Wow.
Talk about a good community.
I just bought a boat on it.
Yeah, I know. I need it for the boat repairs.
Oh, that's so cool.
All right. Well, I'm glad you guys had such a good time. Hopefully I could be there for next year. Let's get into today's show. We're going to be doing one of our I guess, repeat formats now, which is a correspondence show where we can each one of our panelists will bring a story that they are finding interesting, that they think are important for our listeners to pay attention to. And we'll get to that in just a minute, but first we're going to take a quick break. All right, Jamil, you're the man of the hour. So let's start with you. What story did you bring for us today?
Well, I wanted to look at this from a slightly different angle and perspective because, as we have seen the real estate market shift and as investors, we all have a specific point of view, and our point of views differ for sure. But we're really looking at it from like the bottom line of our perspective, right? Are we going to be paying more money for our houses? Are we going to be able to cash flow? Is the BRRRR still working? There's so many different things. Is real estate going to overcorrect? There's just a lot of tension and things that we as investors care about and think about and talk about. Yesterday, however, I'm doing a pop-up meetup at my office. And a lady who follows me on YouTube comes in and gives me a big hug and says, I just want you to know that I've been watching you on YouTube, and I was able to do my first deal. It was a small deal. I made $2,000, and it allowed me to, sustain life for a little while longer. I'm living in my car, and I was like, hold on a second. What? You came to a meetup, and you've done your first deal. You made $2,000, but you live in your car. And she said, yeah, I live in my car. Housing is just way too expensive and I can't figure it out. I can't figure this out. And, right there, I just had this moment where I thought that this perspective is so important to understand and at least talk about. And so lo and behold, I'm, looking at articles and I see an article by AZ Big Media and it's titled, Why Experts in Arizona Say the Growing Housing Crisis or the housing crisis is a growing cancer. And I needed to understand what this is talking about. And so, again, we're looking at this from the different angle, a different perspective. And homelessness here in Phoenix, Arizona has become a massive, massive problem, right? We've got tent cities popping up all over the spots. There's, in every neighborhood you go, there's homelessness. And it's just like regular people, right? It's not just people with mental illness or addictions that you're seeing where you're like, I understand there's a lot of greater social problem or a greater mental or health problem here that's causing some of this difficulty. But this is like moms, dads, just families and just regular folks having hardship, not being able to pay rent. And as I see this and I think, okay, we're in the middle of a correction and housing pricing. Is there any way that this gets better for the little guy? And as I read the article, I see it's not getting any better for the little guy, because what happens is right now, especially as we see rates increasing and demand slowing, days on market in Arizona or Phoenix especially is still 33 days. 33 days on market, which means that there's still demand, right? There's still demand. People are still buying. Yes, prices are depressing. We're already at like over 10% correction in price, but that has not stopped trading. That has not stopped investors from buying, buy and hold investors from buying, large hedge funds and private equity groups from buying. That has not stopped mom and pop landlords from buying. We're just getting everything cheaper right now. That's it. And because we're getting everything cheaper, when you have, people looking at opportunities now, because now you've got the little guy who can come in and actually purchase a home, albeit they can purchase a lot less home than they could have purchased, say, 6 months ago. But now they're at the table and they're trying. And their offer, even though it's probably significantly higher than my offer's cash. My offer's safe. My offer closes. And it's guaranteed. And I'm still winning. I'm still winning at the negotiation table, even though I'm coming in significantly lower. And that is creating more of a situation. It's creating more of a homeless situation. It's creating more. It's still sucking inventory away. And rents are not following the housing situation. right? Pricing right now is correcting 10% or greater in Phoenix, Arizona. Rents have not changed. They're still going up. And so it's that whole, is there a trickle down here? Is there a reprieve for the little guy? And I need to take the perspective because, again, we all, as a community of people, investors, we are all in this together. And there is a greater conversation that we need to have, because what they're proposing in this article is legislation. They're proposing that there is no fair market situation here. The market is not going to correct itself. The market is not going to allow opportunity for smaller people or the retail buyer to come in and participate. It won't, because we don't play by the same rules. Because what that buyer has to qualify for, show for income, show for credit, I never have to do that. I don't have to play by those rules because I come in with cash and I'm going to best them every single time. And so they're proposing legislation. They're proposing legislation on rent control. They're proposing on legislation on how many houses a specific LLC or a corporation can buy. And they're really wanting to create, in my opinion, some regulations that are going to take the fair market or the natural capitalistic market conditions that we all, or many people, believe need to be there, off the table. And when you see, Arizona has flipped from a red state to a blue state, it's, we've all seen it happen. I believe that legislation like this is going to become the conversation. And so I want to talk about it. I want to hear perspectives. I want to understand what do we think as investors about this? What about the perspective of the lady who came to my meetup, who is living in her car right now, who is participating in real estate and doing deals and is a part of maybe the problem. So, that's the article. That's the thought.
I would love to comment on that, Jamil. I remember in the 70s, okay, I know many of you were not born, but I was young, very young, and we were sitting at the dinner table, and it was in 1971 when Nixon took us off the gold standard. And my father said, this is going to be really bad. This is going to create separation between the haves and the have-nots, because this will allow more creation of money without anything to tie it to, which at the time had been gold. And we know that politicians like to spend money. So inflation and the printing of money is a silent tax. It's a tax that people don't understand and don't know about. And that tax is most felt by those who have less money because they have a finite budget. And when things cost more, there's no room for that. So printing money and inflation hurts the lower class and creates more of a lower income class, because more money is going to pay for goods, because more money is being printed instead of taxing people. So it always falls, the culprit always falls on the investor, or often on the investor. And in my opinion, what needs to be regulated, which may never be regulated, is the Federal Reserve that creates that money, and politicians who want that money to stay in office because they keep offering things. So I have a very strong opinion on this. It always falls on the landlords. But if you look at it this way, if you're throwing trillions of dollars out of a helicopter, let's say, and the people who pick up those dollars because they're fast at getting them or they're doing something with them, those are the ones that get blamed, when what they've really done is just picked up the dollars that were thrown out. So the regulation is going to come, and that's what my story is about, and we'll talk about that when we get there. But I do hope that people really look at the systemic issues versus the bad, naughty investors, because at the end of the day, rentals are very important too. If we look back to the 70s, again, when we're talking about this, homeownership rate was much lower. It was 63% in the 60s. It was 66% homeownership in the 70s. Today, it's about 60. It's around it's higher. It's about 65%.
Right there, 66%. Yeah. It's gone up the last 2 quarters just to, everyone says that we're turning to a renter nation.
Yeah, more people are owning homes. It's not that different. It's better than the 70s, 80s, and 90s. And of course, when regulation came in to stimulate housing and get more people buying, that's when things went crazy with more regulation, because of course we know that that's when loans got too easy and it became too easy to buy a home. Homeownership isn't for everybody, but all people do need a home unless they like to live in their car, which some people do. I've got nephews who love living in their vans. That's their choice. But if you don't, otherwise, if you want a home, you're either going to rent it or you're going to own it. And there has been typically 30 to 40% of people who choose to rent for whatever reason, or who are renting. So again, I know that regulation is coming, but I do hope that we're able to get the message out there of what the real problem is.
So you're talking about treating the disease instead of blaming the symptoms.
Yeah, the disease is money printing, and where does that money go? And when people really dive in and look where that money goes, I think they will probably be more upset than with a bunch of institutional investors providing rental homes.
Yeah, and to piggyback on Kathy, I'm in the Seattle market where there is a lot of regulation that has been passed over the last 3 to 4 years. And one thing about the news articles is, I will say, they start hyping up the regulation a little bit more than what it actually is. But the issue is, if it becomes this like fight, investors versus politicians. And it doesn't need to be a fight. It should be a common solution. There's so many different things that could happen that could make homes more affordable. You could subsidize the builders, the investors on their construction costs. You could get them their permits quicker. Like if the city came to me and said, "Hey, look, we want you to cap on rent, but we're gonna forgive you all, maybe some tax relief, some utility relief, and we're gonna give you your permits in 2 weeks." That would be a negotiation that's a fair trade at that point. But the issues there is, a lot of times, is the cities they kind of put up roadblocks all the way through with these investors, the permitting, the construction cost, the fees. We got a new tax that was put on us 2 years ago. We call it the developer tax in Seattle, where they charge us roughly $2 to $3 per square foot on any permit that we're pulling for new construction. Then that's supposed to be going back into the community to help out. The problem is it never makes it to that community. And then all that did wasn't affect us as developers. That just meant we have to pay less now. It just affected this seller that's trying to sell their property and then move into another, whether it's on their next phase of their life. And so I wish there was more community and brainstorming, because there's so many different solutions out there that could keep actually homes more affordable. I mean, we saw construction costs went up by 20, 30, 35% over the last 24 months. The replacement costs are really high. If you can get those costs down, you can charge less for rent. And hopefully at some point in the future, people will come up with solutions that help everybody, because that's how you fix the issue. You don't overcorrect here and overcorrect here.
Yeah, I want to piggyback on that, because James is making a phenomenal point. I think we've gotten too comfortable in this country of playing this us versus them mentality, right? There's the right and the left, the Democrats, the Republicans, the conservatives, the liberals, the landlords, and the investors versus the regular guy. And James is 100% right. Us versus them doesn't solve the problems, right? And I think when you look at this legislation, you have to understand what is the motive behind it. Not what they're saying the motive is, because they're saying the motive is, let's help the little guy, but that's not the motive. The motive is, I want to do the things that my party thinks is good so that I get more votes, reelected, can continue to live the life and do the things that I want to do. If the true reason is to solve the problem, then it has to be together. Nothing gets solved with us versus them. Things truly get fixed. The wound truly starts to heal when we work together. I had the exact same conversation that James is talking about. I spoke at an event about affordable housing, right? And, they invited me because I'm the dirty landlord, right? And they wanted to talk about affordable housing. And that's exactly what I said to them is, I do have property that I can and will take less rent on, but I still have to pay for that. And so if we can work with the city and come up with a way for the city to say, hey, if you can charge less rent for these types of properties. We can do this for you. If we can go, and then we work with the builders and do the same thing and say, hey, if you will build this type of property in this neighborhoods, we can give you these types of breaks or credits, or right, so that everybody is doing something that helps each other out, and then we create, we heal the wound that way. We're not just treating the symptoms. Just like it's got to be that way with everything that we're facing as a country right now. We've got to stop fighting each other. We've got to stop talking about, well, this person or this group of people is bad and my group of people is right. It's not about that, right? We're all on this planet together, sharing these resources that we have, and we all want to live the best lives that we possibly can. And so the only way that happens is if we start to have some empathy to other situations. That's why I love that Jamil brought this story up. He brought the story up. He's on the opposite side. He's on the investor side, but he has empathy and understanding for what the regular person is going through. And he's able to listen to what their struggles are. And so now maybe on a small scale, you and her can come to some sort of way to improve each other's lives, right? But without each of you being willing to understand where the other person is coming from, what the other person has to deal with, right? And then being able to talk about that in a way that it's constructive and not combative, you get to real solutions. And we've got to understand that for any of this to change, landlords, cities and municipalities and local governments and national governments all need to sit down and try to figure out what can we all do collectively to fix the problem, not what can I do on my side that my people like.
Amen.
Yeah, man.
Well said. Well, all of you, very good points. And Jamil, agree. Thank you for bringing up this important topic. It's a really pressing issue right now. It sounds like we all sort of agree that this is a problem, right? Like affordability, I think, in terms of housing, is at like a 40-year low. It's the hardest time since the 80s for people to buy a home. So even though, as Kathy said, home ownership is up and is going up, that is sort of under threat if we remain at these levels of affordability. Rent is going up. And this is just both like a moral and societal economic imperative to fix, like in my opinion, at least. I think, like, to Jamil, to your point, like, something is wrong if people are hustling and working hard and they're living out of their car. Like that's a problem. But to your point, we also need to like consider like what solutions actually work. I actually just listened to a really good podcast on Freakonomics. I don't know if you guys listen to this.
Yeah, great. I love that podcast.
It's great. Yeah. About rent control. I really recommend anyone listen to it. It's like a really good, well-balanced, unbiased perspective on what happens with rent control. And a lot of the times it doesn't work. It actually leads to higher rent. And I won't get into the details with that there, but I think it's really important in solving this issue to not just be reactionary and look into, say, like, okay, let's cap rent. It makes sense on a logical level, but evidence-wise, it doesn't actually do what anyone really wants it to. So I'm curious, Kathy, you mentioned that your story was about some regulation that is potentially coming. I don't know if it's on a national level in California, but can you tell us a little bit more about like what some of the proposed regulations are to sort of try to address this issue?
Yeah, it's 3 Democrats from California who just came out with a new House bill in October. It's called Stop Wall Street Landlords Act. And this is an article from Vox. It is called, if you want to look it up, Democrats Eye New Legislation to Rein in Wall Street Landlords. I remember in 2012, right before Warren Buffett said, oh, if I could buy a few 100,000 homes, I would. That's when Wall Street did jump in because they listened to what he says, and they did find a way to manage the properties and jump in. And it was right around that time that, of course, prices were so low and interest rates were pretty low. And I told all of my friends, you have got to buy something right now. Anybody in California who didn't own real estate at that time, I was like, do it now, because this is going to be your chance. Well, they tried. And because they had FHA loans and any kind of loans, they were bid out. It changed like this. It was in a matter of weeks. Warren Buffett said his thing. funds jumped in. I mean, and it was crazy. So my friends and family who were making offers with loans were losing out every time, because what seller is going to want to sell to a first-time buyer with an FHA loan that may or may not close when they could get a cash offer from a Wall Street firm for much more, you know? So there's always two sides or three sides or four sides to any story when you talk about regulation. Personally, back then, I would have loved to see some regulation back then, because it was an incredible time for homeowners to be able to lock in low home prices, but they couldn't they couldn't compete. That would have been a great time to maybe do something where you get 30 days, to see if for a first time buyer, to see if your loan closes for what the institutional investor would pay. So the seller is still going to get the deal. The investor can be on the sidelines. If the first time home buyer doesn't close, then the investor can come in. I mean, some kind of regulation I really think would have been nice, because I now see my friends 10 years later who never were able to get into the market, and they can barely survive. And they're, some of them are in their 60s and they're still renting and are getting priced out. So it is a very serious issue, has been for a long time. Regulation has not come in, probably, it's kind of late, basically, right? And we got to remember that the Fed was subsidizing housing until this year, until March. So keeping interest rates low, which drove, prices up. So this article is, again, it's basically saying we've got to stop Wall Street landlords, even though they only represented 3% of home sales. And that would be funds that own 100 homes or more. Between 2021 and 2022, it was only 3%. So they're not as bad as people think. They own about a little over 1% of rental properties that are out there. But in certain markets, they're really active. And it's in those markets, and I'll mention some of them: Atlanta, Jacksonville, Charlotte, Phoenix, Miami. In those markets, they have made it really hard for homeowners to get in. So with this act, I kind of I like the proposal in the sense that they're basically saying maybe we don't give the investors the same tax deductions that a homeowner would get. Maybe there's a transfer tax, or there's a different kind of tax if you're an institutional investor. They also recognize that really the real issue is supply, and that maybe the better regulation or incentive would be tax credits. This to me is like super obvious, like, of course, tax credits to people who will bring in affordable housing. Because anytime you give any kind of tax incentive, that's where the money goes. So I do think it's a somewhat balanced proposal. I didn't read the whole thing, and the article just kind of talks about it, or may or may not go through. But I do know that other countries charge more to an investor than a homeowner in taxes. There's the property tax is going to be higher. There's going to be potentially a transfer tax. So this isn't something new or unusual. And I don't see that as a bad thing at all. Now, and you're talking about, I'm a fund manager, right? Like, this would not be good for me. We have a fund. We're buying aggressively. I just got back from Dallas, and we just tied up, homes for about $120,000 that don't need, well, they probably need $20,000 to $30,000 in rehab, and the ARV is going to be about $220,000 for our fund at Grow Developments. And I can tell you from a fund manager perspective, a first time buyer wouldn't want that home. You guys know that. We fix homes. To put a first time home buyer who's barely able to afford the home to begin with, maybe doing a 3% down FHA loan, now they got a house that it is barely livable. Yep. So investors are needed. And I think that voice has to be out there too, that investors like me come in, take these old houses up and pick them up. We have the capital, because we're raising that capital to buy it, fix it, and make it a really nice, clean, safe place for a rental. And there are people who need that rental.
And you need to be incentivized. So if we were taxed too much, and if there were too high a transfer taxes, we probably wouldn't do it, because quite honestly, a single family rental fund, there's not a huge spread there anyway. It's not like, 20, 30, 40% returns that you're seeing, I don't know if you're seeing that anywhere, but flippers are going to make more money. The buy and hold investor funds, the margins are pretty thin. So if you want companies like mine's definitely smaller than these big ones, there does have to be incentive to be able to create this clean, safe housing. And housing gets old.
Somebody was saying, the earth likes to eat housing. If you leave a house for very long, it will fall into the ground and Mother Nature will eat it. Right? It will. After 20, 30, 40 years, those homes don't do so well. They need constant investment.
27.5, right?
Yeah. So
Appreciation.
So it's an interesting article. I would definitely read it and check it out. One other thing I do agree with is that you shouldn't be subsidizing the investor if it's not needed. Like I said, okay, subsidize the investor for trying to bring on affordable housing. I think I told you guys in our Park City project, we had to bring in 30% affordable, and we're super happy to do it. But when costs went up, and it cost twice the price to build that house, they're not letting us sell it for more because it has to stay in the affordable. So we're losing about $400,000 per property of what it's costing us to build this affordable housing. Why should I have to do that? That seems like it should be a government incentive for that, because it's hurting our investors too. If prices go up, we have to eat that.
I think that's a really good point, and agree with a lot of what you're saying, but you just to extrapolate that and how this has an impact in the long term, if the requirement that developers have affordable housing makes sense to a lot of people, myself included, at the surface level. But then you have to think about, you're in this conundrum now, and unfortunately you're losing money. Your investors are going to be hurt by this. It means that you are probably less likely to do something like this in the future. And so it has this way of, even though the government is trying to create more affordable housing, if it's not done in a tactful way where there's some flexibility, and to James's point, where you're actually like working together as partners to make something actually work long term, it could actually have some of the adverse effects and sort of the opposite of what is intended.
I could not agree more. I mean, we will never do this again, because who could have predicted COVID? Who could have? The government's telling us we can't send our workers to work, yet we're still paying the overhead, and then costs go up double, and we go to the county and say, I mean, you told us we could only sell these homes for $350,000. They're costing us $800,000 to build. Is there any flexibility? And the answer is no. They won't do it.
The only answer is don't build it.
Yeah.
It's just like, all right. This turns into a parking lot at this point. So and
that's not going to help the firefighters and teachers that need that.
And then we're charging rent for parking.
Yeah. Right.
One thing I want to mention is, when I read these articles or hear this about these hedge funds that have bought a lot of homes, and I've sold a lot of hedge funds properties. And these hedge funds did not take inventory from the first time home buyer. They did not take inventory from any home buyer, and especially with like a low down home buyer, because they needed so much work. They're creating inventory. They're carcasses, right? They're homes that are not livable. They require capital to fix them. And no homeowner is going to go. I mean, the government needs to, if that's what they want to do, then they need to come in with some construction teams and some zero down programs and some construction financing. And then you, government, fix the properties.
Yeah. Because
it's not inventory. The inventory is not leaving because it was never inventory.
Good point.
It's being created by these investment companies, and everyone's complaining about them eating up all the product right now, or over the last 2 years. We needed those buyers in 2008, 9, 10, 11. The inventory was massive, and it was unconsumable at the time. And the only reason it got consumed up is because these big funds came into the markets and they bought the dirtiest of the dirt, and they restored these properties. And we don't know what would have happened to that market and how long we would have been bottomed out if it wasn't for these companies. So there's always give and takes at both times. But I mean, I think it's short-sighted, because they're creating inventory and housing. It's a matter of how do we control the cost, and that's just policy at that point.
Yeah, I'm curious what you guys think, because one of the comments made in this article was at a minimum, investors shouldn't be subsidized for rental housing. And what I mean by that is a lot of these big funds got Fannie and Freddie backed low interest rate loans. These are government loans. Fannie and Freddie were created to help people, individuals, low income individuals, buy homes. That's why we have government backed loans. So why were these hedge funds getting those? So I can agree, again, I love what Henry said. Let's work together towards a common goal. I think nobody wants families living in their cars unless they want to. Like I said, my nephews make good money and they love living in their van. So again, unless they want to.
All right. Well, this is a great conversation, everyone. Thank you. It's an important topic and probably one that's going to come up more in the near future. So I'll definitely be reading up more on this. So thank you, Jamil and Kathy, for sharing these stories with us. All right, let's move on to a different conversation about the housing market. Henry, it sounds like you brought a different type of story for us. What do you got?
Yeah, I like this article because it's essentially the article itself kind of mirrors what's happening in real life, right? So the headline is economists say a U.S. housing recession has already arrived. It's already here, right? And what they're saying is that the housing market index is basically telling us that it's declined to 33, and anything under 50 spells trouble. So because the scale it's on a 100-point scale. So and so what they're saying is based on this housing market index that the housing market is already in recession. It's been in a recession since midsummer, but the index has declined for 11 straight months. So the article itself is a scary headline, but at the end of the day, this index was based on what home builders are saying. And the market for a home builder has been different than the market for a traditional investor or the market for a first time home buyer, somebody who's not looking to buy to invest, but to buy to live. And it then goes on to talk about, well, the interest rates are high and the same home now is going to cost you $1,000 more a month than it was 3 months ago, which is very true. But then it also goes to say, well, interest rates past 7%, but they've come back down a little bit to around 6.3% this month. And so this article in itself feels like a roller coaster ride. Like when I read the article, I'm not quite sure how to feel. I just feel like I'm going up and down. So like this is good and this is bad and this is good and this is bad. And it's such a reflection of what the first time investor, the new investor, the first time home buyer is all feeling right now. Because they're like, do I get in? No, I don't get in. This is high. Do I buy? And what I want people to understand is that we can really only make decisions right now based on what we currently know. But what I know as an investor is that the real estate market is a cycle, right? There's going to be a time to get in when prices are really low, like right now. You're able to negotiate a lower price. And that goes for the first time home buyer and the investor because there are less buyers than there were a few months ago, right? So that gives you an opportunity to buy at a lower cost. But there's also going to be a time in the market where the prices are high, but maybe the cost to borrow the money is lower, meaning that A, you can afford more, and B, um, and so it's easier for you to get in there and to buy something and be able to afford a home maybe at a higher price. And so what's important is understanding what the market is giving you right now. I think I've used this analogy before, but in sports they say you take what the defense gives you, right? There's always going to be an opportunity no matter what type of market cycle that we are in. If you look at what's currently happening right now, I want people to be able to focus on, okay, what is this market giving me as an opportunity? And is that opportunity something that fits my financial goals? If your financial goal is to buy property and hold it for the long term so that you're creating cash flow and building wealth through equity, it's a phenomenal time to buy a property at a discount. Yes, the money costs more, but you're getting a deeper discount. So it somewhat offsets itself depending on the discount, right? So if that's your strategy, it's great. If your strategy is to trade, to buy a property, fix it up, and then sell it in a short period of time, the market isn't really giving you that if you're inexperienced, right? If you're experienced and you have processes and systems in place to help you find those discounted properties, to help you get them renovated very quickly and back on the market and sold very quickly, then you can probably do that strategy. But if you're just a normal investor doing this first, second, third, fourth, fifth deal, trading isn't as easy right now. It's better for a more experienced investor. So you just have to understand, what is the market telling me right now that is an opportunity, and does that opportunity fit my financial goals?
I could not agree more, Henry. That was such good points. As you know, I just got back from Phoenix, and there was the IMN Single Family Rental Conference. It's their 10th year, and you had all kinds of buy and hold investors there. In the opening session, they gave these really good stats from John Burns that I just want to share that supports what you said. They said that there's a 57% decline in iBuyers. So if iBuyers were bugging you, there's 57% less. I mean, that's huge in itself. There's a 27% decline in purchases from the funds that are the big ones, 100 homes or more. And what was super interesting, and they said they didn't really know why, but they think they know why. But in the 9 to 100 units, that they have not declined. They're buying, and then the newbies, there's a 22% decline because maybe they don't have the experience, like you said, and aren't sure how to get the deals. So the interpretation was these big funds, these big investors, they're kind of struggling right now because a lot of them pivoted into building new home to, build to rent, huge developments of new homes, and the terms have changed, right? Their construction costs have gone up, as I know, and as you guys know, their cost to borrow has gone up, and then the end financing has gone up. So their plans are not working out as expected. So there's expected to be quite a bit of fallout in that regard. And then those who would buy scattered lots like we're doing, or scattered homes, just buying homes in basically a BRRRR fund model, buying, fixing, getting our money back and doing it again in the fund. You have to be nimble. You have to really know your market. You have to be a really expert investor. You can't be a white-gloved Wall Street investor and do that, right? So this is the time. I can't emphasize enough what Henry just said, that this is the time for us, for the people that can be nimble and can go in there and buy what nobody else wants and fix it up and still keep it affordable for somebody and provide safe, affordable housing. This is our turn. It's our game. The big players are out because they don't know how to manage a game like that.
Yeah, the big guys they can't adjust, and that's they move too slow. They move too slow. Their staff is too heavy, and even us, and we're not big by any means compared to funds, but like as you grow your businesses out, we've had, as the market has transitioned, we've had to shrink this back and get nimble. We can't have, the more bodies you have and the more people you have doesn't mean it's more efficient. It just means it kind of gets more process orientated, but that doesn't mean that your processes are, like you said, nimble, where you got to cut costs. Flipping homes is not an easy thing. It is not something you can build a home a lot easier than you can flip a house, right? With building home, you get plans. You're working with professional subcontractors. They bid the plans, and then you can schedule it accordingly. These old homes you rip into, and all of a sudden you got rotted walls, things falling. You got dead bodies who knows what happens inside these walls, and you have to be able to pivot.
Dead bodies everywhere.
Only in the Pacific Northwest, by the way, guys.
Things happen, right? And that's what happens is they can't adjust, and that's it's. And then that's where I do think we might see a graveyard of investment property coming up. I keep coming back to that, because if you can't adjust and you can't control your costs, if you're 10% off on your construction, your values, and your hold times, that turns into a big number if it's a large property. And you have to be able to adjust and adapt. I know I've switched all my businesses to where we are way more nimble, way smaller, way more ninja, get in, get out. Like on whatever business it is, we're getting in and out, and you have to do that by being nimble.
What's interesting is, from my company, Keegley, we're a national wholesaler, so I get to see what this looks like from the investor standpoint, and what the volume of trades are happening and how much demand is there. Now, what's funny is that a lot of my competitors, when the big funds were buying a lot of homes, the iBuyers, the institutions that have 100 or more homes were buying, most of my competition focused right on them. They said, oh, these little mom and pop investors that are buying hold guys, fix and flippers, they're not paying us enough. They're not they're not closing fast enough, they're not overpaying, so let's just focus on these institutions. And they fail to create relationships or maintain relationships with the small ma and pa guy. Our business model never shifted. We stayed with the small ma and pa guy all the way through. Right now, when you look at our volume of trading, I'm looking at wholesalers, and there's a graveyard of wholesalers out there because they all screwed up, shifting their business to the funds, where we stayed with the ma and pa guy. And our volume, although we did take a dip, we had a couple of months where things were a little bit, we had to pivot and understand. But again, being nimble and being able to adjust, our volumes have picked right up and we're crushing it. And so you can see that this demand that, you guys are talking about, where it's when Kathy says it's our time, it is our time. And the people who are in the know, who understand it, they're getting in and they're making it happen.
All right. Well, great conversation. This has been really fascinating. Thank you for bringing that, Henry. James, what did you bring for us?
So I pulled an article because I think it's important to kind of look at these types of clickbaity articles. But it says from Fortune, 20% price decline, 7 forecast models are leaning towards crash. Here's what the other 13 models of the 2023 market are going. The reason I do like the article is it gives you a good perspective from all different kind of sectors. It's talking, like Wells Fargo, JP Morgan, they're giving their predictions. There's Moody Analytics in there with John Burns. They have their predictions. And then you have the Zillows and the Redfins are all in there too. And in this article, you can click through each one and read their perspective and how they came up with the analytics. The one thing I don't like about it is this clickbait, right? People are trying to get people to download stuff, 20% drop, that's fear. If you really read through the whole article, there's only 2 people that even reference that number. Most of them are substantially lower in the 5 to 10% range on the decline.
Can I guess who the 20% are?
Yeah. Who do you think?
Ivy Zellman.
No, that wasn't one of them.
Ivy Zellman and Moody's Analytics.
Actually, no. Moody was not. John Burns was the most negative.
Oh.
22%. Actually.
Yeah, they're pretty bearish.
Yes.
Yeah.
Moody was around 10%.
John Burns is a smart guy.
Yes.
And he's usually right.
I know.
Yeah. You might want to take that one seriously.
I might agree with him because there's this one stat that just sometimes I got to remember common sense, right? There's all this data out there. There's all these opinions, like Henry was saying too, this roller coaster of a ride. But sometimes it just comes down to straight common sense. It says 20% peak through drop. So home prices will be back to October 21 levels with a 10% drop. They'll be at a 20% drop. We'll still be at 2021 levels in the late February. So it's all about that massive run. And so it's most of the gains were done in 2021 or a big chunk of them. And so, what the article is really referencing is we're not going into 2008 because they don't think that there's going to be this mortgage crisis and all these things going on with the economy. They just think everything's deflating backwards. And right now, I firmly believe that. I don't think we're going into a tailspin of 2008. 2008 was the lights went out, and we were all sitting in the dark for a year going, how do we get this back on? This is just going to be deflating things down, and it is going to hurt a little bit on the way on the door from stuff that you bought in 2021 or in or 22. But it will get better. Right. And you just have to kind of adjust. And the reason I like digging into all these stats and all these predictions is we're building this into our underwriting. We can still buy very safely if we're predicting, there's nothing wrong with predicting the market might go down a little bit, but you have to do it in an intelligent way because I'm an active investor. I can't get spooked that's unrealistic. A lot of the 20% drop, I think we've already seen a lot of that drop. And I think that we're probably another 5% skid from where we are because we've already seen this 10. I know in Seattle I've seen 20%, and that's just what it's been. But it allows me to continue to purchase. I can build that into my analytics as I'm underwriting. I'm looking at things. I'm going, okay, if I think the market's still a little bit risky, I'm just not pushing the values. There's nothing wrong with that, and you can still get those buys and close the deals. And I think it's really important that investors establish what they think. Personally, what I think is going to be different than Henry, Kathy, and Jamil. We're going to buy differently. We're going to do our businesses differently, but we are doing the right research off all our experience, and we're building that into what we're doing in our specific market. because Jamil's in Phoenix, I'm in Seattle. These are different markets. We're also doing different things. And so you have to really narrow down to what do you want to do in this transitionary market, then research that information and you can protect yourself. There's a lot of really good buys right now. And I don't really mind these articles because it does spook people. We are buying we've bought more property, and it's been way different type of property, but we've bought more volume of property in the last 90 days than we did in the first 6 months of the year. And it's completely different product, but the opportunities are out there. Just really, you have to, as an investor, listen to everyone, but then you got to kind of interpret it and really figure out what you want to go with. You know, like one of them is Redfin was, or I think it was Zillow was predicting a 0.1 drop. And so based on what I know about the iBuyers, I go the opposite direction or whatever they're recommending. If they're saying 1%, I'm thinking it's 5 to 6%. But, I think it's just really important that people kind of interpret this information and then build it into your own day-to-day practice into your market, because every market's different. Every different thing you're doing is changing. And so just because housing could drop 20%, that might not affect you at all. So just really pay attention to these news headlines and dig in. Don't just pay attention to the scary clickbait.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes down to forecasting, I feel like there's basically two things you should be considering when you read this stuff. First is, what's the business model of the people forecasting? Like, are you Zillow or Redfin or the Mortgage Bankers Association? Because you probably have a vested interest in predicting things one way. But I think there's a lot of really good, like, reputable forecasts out there. And to me, it all just hinges on mortgage rates. Like, if you think mortgage rates are going to stay above 7%, prices could fall 20%. I don't personally believe mortgage rates are going to stay that high. And so I think there's a different group of people who are saying mortgage rates are going to be, in the high 5s, low 6s next year. And then you're probably seeing single digit declines. I'm personally in that camp. We've all probably talked about this at length, but I think that's a lot of why you see these like differentiating things. Because if mortgage rates stay high or go like 7 to 8%, like there is going to be a crash, in my opinion, like 20%. But, we've already seen mortgage rates come down to 6.3%. Bond yields continue to fall. Like if they stay where they are right now, mortgage rates will be in the 5s next year. So like, I think those are just things that you should keep an eye on. If you want to understand who's correct here, just look at mortgage rates. And the higher they go, the higher chance of a crash. Any last thoughts, Jamil, Henry, Kathy?
Just last thoughts from IMN were that renting is 30% more affordable in most places than owning the same home. So the fundamentals are really strong for being a landlord right now.
Yep.
Awesome. I like that tidbit. Put that on Instagram. All right. Well, thank you all so much for being here. We appreciate it. Had a lot of fun, and we'll see you guys next time. If you are listening to this, we always appreciate a great review or sharing this content. If you also think this was one of the best shows of the year, tell everyone you know on Instagram or just in the street. Tell everyone you know that this was the best episode and that they should go listen to it. Thank you all so much for listening. We'll see you next time for On the Market. On the Market is created by me, Dave Meyer, and Kaylin Bennett. Produced by Kaylin Bennett. Editing by Joel Esparza and Onyx Media. Research by Pooja Jindal. And a big thanks to the entire BiggerPockets team. The content on the show On the Market are opinions only. All listeners should independently verify data points, opinions, and investment strategies.